your coffee session is a very, very exciting and personally my most favorite one, which is Islam and science. So without any further delay, I would like to invite Dr. Athar Usama.
And the basic idea behind this task force project was to try to create a debate on issues at the intersection of science, Islam, and the society in the Muslim world. So we had two two task forces that we were we set up 2 years ago. And the second task force was on science and Islam. And the purpose of this task force was to look at the issues of theology that obviously sort of impacted on science and science on theology, etc. But I thought it would be useful for us to maybe listen from Osama first about the major findings of the report. You already have the report with you, and then we have Professor Hoodbhoy with us, who wrote as far as I know one of the earliest sort of work on this on this subject, especially in Pakistan, but also I think one of the early works in this subject. So with that, I want to invite Usama to talk about the key findings of the task force report. So with that, Usama, it's over to you.
Okay, then talk again.
So with that, I want to move to Dr. Pervez Hoodbhoy for his intervention.
So thank you very much, Athar, for inviting me here. I browsed through the report of this task force, and my impression is that it is thoughtful and well considered, and so I congratulate you on this. The question that you raised, which you called the big question, had two parts. The first part of which was, is reconciliation between Islam and science desirable or possible?
So let me break this up into two parts. The first part is reconciliation desirable? Well, this begs the question, reconciliate with whom? Science doesn't care. Science is doing well enough. We just saw gravitational waves from the collision of two black holes 1,300 million light years ago. We've uncovered the DNA molecule. We've understood what's inside not just the atom, but inside the nucleus of the atom. We've made spectacular advances in every field of physics, chemistry, biology, and in fact, you could say that science is doing too well for its own good. So, whichever way Muslims respond to science may be of importance to us, but it's not really important to science because Muslims have had almost no contribution to make in the last 7 centuries. Now earlier, between the 9th and the 13th centuries, Muslims had a very important role, just as before them, the Greeks had an important role, and before them, the Chinese and the Indians. And even before them, there were the Egyptians and the Babylonians. So it really doesn't matter to science what we think of it. But now this brings upon ourselves another question. Let's say that your task force or science initiative or whatever was able to agree upon a formula which says that, yes, science and Islam are compatible. So you have a bunch of maybe 20 people, maybe 50, I don't know how many of you were involved in that. But suppose you came up with that formula, why should the others believe it? After all, this would be the opinion of your task force. There's never been an agreement on whether science and Islam are compatible, and there never will be. Because theological issues, arguments, are never solved using evidence and proof the way scientific arguments are resolved. So it will always be somebody's opinion. Therefore, such an agreement is not likely to carry very much meaning. Actually, it's even worse than that. Because when we ask the question whether Islam and science are compatible, we're really asking for whether Muslims are willing or not willing to go along with science. Not Islam, but Muslims. So, this then brings about an even more important question, which is who is a Muslim and who is not. There is no definition that is acceptable to everyone. In fact, even in a legal sense. So it's not that saying La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah qualifies you to be a Muslim, because as the Supreme Court of Pakistan ruled, that is insufficient. There was the Munir report of the 1950s, which took in the testimony of different alims in Pakistan following the Ahmadi riots, and they couldn't come up with that definition. So if you cannot come up with a definition of a Muslim, if you cannot get more than so many Muslims to agree this way or that way, then the whole question becomes moot. Now, let's let that question be for a little while. And let's ask if reconciliation is possible. Well, that will depend on how much flexibility there is in interpreting the Holy Quran. This report of yours, it rightly focuses on the origin of life and on miracles, because of course these are the two outstanding areas of physics, of biology, of science, which are in real or apparent conflict with Islam. Rightly so, and I think you did very well by taking diverse views on this. That you couldn't come to a consensus is because there cannot be a consensus. But there are other issues that science has a great deal of difficulty with when it comes to a matter of reconciling what is in the Quran with science, the scientific method, and observed phenomena. I refer here, for example, to the issue of earthquakes. It is commonly believed in Pakistan and reinforced by the ulama that earthquakes are a result of divine retribution. We have sinned, therefore we are to be punished. And although I am not sufficiently expert in Arabic to perform any kind of an exegesis, nevertheless, I do believe that at least 90% of the people in this country are convinced that earthquakes are the result of divine punishment. On the other hand, science has a totally, completely different view on this. Science attributes earthquakes to the slippage of tectonic plates, a natural process that takes place because the earth was once molten and is solidifying. And therefore, the very notion that earthquakes are caused by an external agency, external to physics, external to physical law, is simply not acceptable to science. Or let's take the issue of, for example, rain. When there is a drought in this country, the government of Pakistan invites the public to go out and perform Salat-e Istasqa, the prayer for rain. This is what the ulama in this country also exhort people to do. And this is why we have literally millions of people out praying for rain. Again, science has a major problem with this, because science believes that rain is a meteorological phenomenon, one that can be predicted, to an extent controlled, such as by cloud seeding, and that it is subject to the very same laws of physics which govern whether this pen is to fall down and at what speed. In the issue of biological sciences, it is believed by science that disease is caused by microbes, by germs, bacteria, viruses, and that again, it doesn't really matter whether you are pious or whether you are the very opposite. Your lifespan and your health will be determined by what microbes have infested your body. And if there is a means of killing those microbes, such as with antibiotics, well, then you get a longer time to live. So, you could have taken those issues also under consideration in your report. Finally, let me come to the second part of your question, which is, how do Muslim responses to science's big questions help bring about such reconciliation? Well, the big questions of science today, I can tell you, those that I'm familiar with, such as how do you reconcile gravity with the other forces of nature? How do you teleport quantum states from one position to another position far away without transporting matter? How do you specifically engineer certain parts of the DNA molecule to achieve certain ends, such as increased longevity, etc.? There are a whole bunch of such questions. But these are not the big questions for Islam, at least so far as I understand it, because I have been listening closely to what the Council of Islamic Ideology in Islamabad has been debating. Of course, some of those issues have got nothing to do with science. So, for example, the age of marriageability. But some of them do have to do with science, like whether DNA is acceptable as a test for rape. Can it be used for convicting a rapist? The decision was that it cannot be. But I wouldn't call these big questions of science. So today, it breaks my heart, but I'm afraid Muslims are not talking about the big questions of science. They're talking about the big questions that used to be, well, maybe 1,000 years ago. In conclusion, I think that the only way to make science prosper among Muslims once again will be to do what the other faiths, Christianity, Judaism, and Hinduism have managed to do much more successfully than we have, which is to divorce science from faith. Keep your faith. Be as religious as you want. That is your personal matter. It cannot be allowed to intrude into matters of science. Not a soft overlap or a hard overlap. I say absolutely zero overlap. Keep your faith. Keep your science elsewhere. Because, after all, let's remember, there has never been a situation where out of any holy book anywhere, belonging to any faith, that has led to a new invention, that has led to an experiment leading to testable results, or a new theory, a theory meaning that which can be falsified. So, in this 21st century, if we Muslims wish to avoid the failure of the last 7 centuries, there is one and only one way, which is a complete and a total divorce. I very much appreciate Dr. Nidhal Guessom's motivation for seeking reconciliation, because in its absence, you will have these horrific forces like Daesh and Taliban and Boko Haram rising to the top and getting support through a broad cross-section of the Muslim world. However, whatever happens politically has to be divorced from the facts that actually exist. I mean, can one find this reconciliation? I do not believe that it is possible unless one radically reinterprets Islamic theology, such as was done by Sayyid Ahmad Khan 150 years ago. I also agree with you, science is not everything, and in fact it should not be everything. Art, aesthetics, poetry, music, these are things of beauty that humans have created and which should be treasured. But I am very glad to have heard both from Professor Guessom and to have read your report, and I think that this is a way towards eventually raising the level of debate in the Muslim world.
I have glanced through the report, and as Dr. Hoodbhoy has also said that it has been very well put together. I would like to raise this question: how to take this debate forward and how to introduce this debate to larger sections of the society.
I still see a clear conflict between Islam and science, because the very sources of knowledge in both these bodies is totally different. One is replicable, one is empirical, one is pretty hard. You could test it again and again and again. The other is totally untestable. There's no way, there's no tool existing to test any of the assertions we see in Islam. So conflict, there's a clear conflict on that basis. And I'm unsure why it's not touched upon in the report, at least in the parts which I've read. Second one is reconciliation. Reconciliation for me sounds a bit too desperate. Like it's bringing two different sort of bodies of knowledge and forcing them to merge when they're like actually repelling each other at different levels. So I still am not ready to buy the word reconciliation. Why can't we just let them coexist? I would invite you to do a thought experiment. Do you have any problem with a person A who avoids any form of modern medicine and says, I'm going to pray to God and He's going to heal me and He's going to take away the cancer or whatever? I'll give a biology example because I'm a biologist. Person B says, I'll try my best, I'll take all the medicines that there is out there, I'll use what top quality science is out there, and then I'll pray on top of it because that's my personal belief and that's what matters to me. And that's what's my last resort. The last resort is the key word. So if I can ask you, do you have a problem with person A or B? Or both?
I have no problem if people want to pray after they've taken the medicine.
Yes, exactly.
It makes them feel better.
And it's the personal sphere, right?
It's entirely in the personal sphere. And so I am all for it.
Exactly.
Actually, I am more inclined to say that I don't have much to add to whatever has already been said. Quite a bit has been said already. Except that the last point is worth considering. I think the point is that the conflict actually arises in the popular discourse in religion. When the religion goes to people, and then there are people who are the champions of religion and religious ideas and thoughts, the way they react to science and the way they project religion and the way they impact on the public thinking is where it all matters.
Can we have great science without, say, good philosophy being done in the country?
Well, I'd like to say no, but in fact that wouldn't be true. You have countries like Korea and Japan and China where I don't think there is a particular emphasis on philosophy, and yet they manage to do pretty decent science. Maybe not at the cutting edge, but okay stuff. We are very, very far from that. And I think that primarily has to do with education. When our education is about simple obedience and simple regurgitation of facts, that then does not equip the student to solve problems. And science is all about solving problems. The Chinese, the Japanese, the Indians, they know that without that they can't do science. And so even though they don't have great philosophy departments, I mean, India might, but certainly not China or Korea, you can get by, I think.
I think that's a very nice point, because so talking about ideas when it comes to technological solutions and science, I think that could be a low-hanging fruit for us at this stage. So instead of deeper, more philosophical, sometimes more controversial discussions, let's perhaps start with a normal, a more universal discussion of science, let's say, about technology, about how it's used, about how people benefit from it. That's one of the principles I've employed, at least at the work I do at a non-profit in Peshawar, where we're trying to promote technology. So it's consciously apolitical and a-religious. So I think let's not hurt the apolitical and a-religious essence of science by bringing in controversial discussions at the very beginning. Maybe talking about everyday problems, everyday science in the daily life. Let's say we don't have any science popularization shows, any magazines. There's no fodder for the masses, I think. So maybe if we start off with very basic sort of stuff, everyday life sort of stuff, I think we could help educate the masses and move towards a more educated discourse. Because the public, I don't think it's ready yet for consuming this sort of sometimes very radical thoughts.
Faisal, I can appreciate your point and the position where you are coming from. But you see, only teaching science would not do the trick. It's the whole inculcation of the whole culture of science, where you question things and you in fact try to cultivate doubt.
I want to thank everybody for being here and sharing your thoughts on the subject, and people who are on Skype, Nidhal, Usama and Saad, for being here as well. You've been very patient in listening all this, despite all the technological challenges, and hopefully inshallah we'll see how this makes an impact ultimately on on the people that we want to make an impact on. Thank you very much, Dr. Shah, for coming, and everybody else.